guys. Well, thank you for coming to our Xactware Leadership 24/7 meetup. We are excited to have I know we have a few faces who are Xactware leaders or managers, so we're excited to have you guys. Raise your hand if you aren't Xactware. I know there's a few more. Okay, so we've got a few. Awesome. Thank you for coming. We host this meetup group, so we have them every other month. The next one will be in February. We have them posted. If you want to look at the events we have with Meetup, we have 4 different groups that we host throughout the year, and that's on a regular basis. We have about 2 a month. You're welcome to come to any of those. Our group on meetup.com is called A La Code. If you can't find it, just find me afterwards and I can point in the right direction. This group is a little more specific. It's for our leaders and managers, so please feel free to come. We want you to learn and develop with us. So with that, we are excited to have Gordon Whitehead again. He's going to be our main trainer for this group. And I know some of you who have been to these meetups before have heard this bio. We're going to go through it again. Sorry, he told me not to do it, but I know some of you are new. I'm going to read it anyways, and then I'll shorten it as we all get more familiar with each other throughout the year. So I'm assuming we'll get a lot of repeats throughout the years. We'll host this and hope we do see you more. We always have lunch, so please come hungry. And it'll be a half hour that we socialize, get to know each other a little bit better, and then we'll have the presentation from noon until 1. So let me just tell you a little bit about Gordon. So Gordon specializes in leadership and organizational development with a particular interest in helping emerging leaders accelerate their leadership growth. His career includes 13 years in the United States Marine Corps, where he served both as an enlisted man and as an officer. He left the Marines as a captain to join the Nike team, where he held several positions with international responsibilities, including the Director of IT of the Americas region. Other professional positions include Director of IT for Sequent Computers, Vice President for FB&B Consulting Group, and Vice President of IT Operations for Corville Corporation. Gordon has been a head varsity basketball coach and an assistant varsity football coach for championship teams in Oregon. He received his Bachelor's of Arts degree from Oregon State University in business with concentrations in business administration and finance with a minor in Japanese. He holds a Doctor of Management degree from George Fox University and is an adjunct professor at Utah Valley University and Brigham Young University. Gordon is a published author on various leadership topics. He founded Leadership 24/7 to advance the art of leadership by teaching mentoring and coaching leaders and organizations to higher performance by unlocking the capacity of their people. Gordon is married to Diane Whitehead, and I don't see her today. Did she? We pointed her out last time. So
she has her own business, and she's out trying to.
So she's busy. Okay, sounds good. Normally she joins us, so we're sad to not have her today. So he's married to Diane Whitehead, and they have 8 children and 7 grandchildren. So if you would join me in welcoming Gordon, we'll turn the time over to him.
That was awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. As she mentioned, my wife joins me a lot of times, but she launched her own business, and she's out, competing with me, and so she's got other great business things going on right now. But I know she'll be here next time. Anyway, I appreciate everybody coming. And just out of curiosity, how many of you came today with a problem in mind that you're like, I really need to pitch this to somebody. I have to get this approved so I have my budget for next year, or I have a project I need to get through. How many of you have that kind of issue in mind while you're here? Just a couple? Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Well, I'll get into the details of what we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but I always forget to do this because I have my company. It's called Leaders247.com, and I always forget to tell people what I do. That was a great introduction, but here's what I do very specifically. I do 3 things. Do strategy and execution consulting. And really, I call this agile business planning. The other thing I do is we take on big business problems and solve them. I don't know about you, but every company has a couple of really thorny issues that they face that they've tried to solve a couple of times, and the more they try to solve them, the more ugly they get, and they just get stuck in political mess and nobody internally can break them through. Well, that's where you bring in somebody who's outside, who's not bounded by the politics of the organization, and be able to break that project through and get it done. So we specialize in taking on those big business problems that have been problematic for a while but are important to get done. And the final thing, which really is my favorite thing, and that's leadership development and coaching. So we do leadership development for organizations, and then I also do coaching and mentoring within organizations, and I have some personal clients as well. So those are the three types of things Leaders247 does. Thought I'd make just a brief plug for that. Now on to our topic. There are six, in my mind, there are six big leadership competencies. The first is relationship building. And I think as you see these, you're going to think, oh yeah. And by the way, the reason competencies are important, if you're in the business of managing people or you're in the business of hiring people and interviewing people for jobs, you kind of want to know if they're competent at a skill. And so you start asking questions and you start looking at their past and integrating that into some experiential activities to see, oh, can they really do those competencies? Those are important. And likewise, when you're developing people for a talent or a job in leadership, for example, you really should think about it from a competency point of view. How do we get these basic competencies, or how do we continue to evolve and develop these competencies for our people? And so in my mind, relationship building is the first big one. The second big one is problem solving and decision making. They go hand in hand. Being able to take on a problem and make decisions in a timely manner, be able to solve those problems. These are skills that executives are looking for as they promote people through the ranks. Influence and skillful use of power. And believe me, if you're a person that works for a leader who doesn't have the ability to influence and use power in a skillful way, you suffer. And you're like, wow, I wish my leader had influence and skillful use of power, because it makes a big difference in terms of the types of projects you get to do and the things you get to work on. And so having the ability to influence others, and leadership comes with power. And sometimes we don't like to use that word because it sounds a little dogmatic. But in reality, one of the roles of a leader is to use power in a way that moves things forward. And so skillfully using that power in an organization is an important competency. Being able to organize and plan, delegating, time management, all of those things fall into this as a very important leadership competency. But the one I picked today for us to talk about is communicating. And communicating a specific type of a thing. Leaders have to be great communicators. They have to be great communicators at the written level. They have to be great communicators at the oratory type of level. They have to be teachers. They have to be able to write. So there's a lot of ways that we communicate. And I want to focus on this idea of taking complex topics, or taking a topic that we really want to get action around. How do we make people change, or how do we move this ball forward? And I want to use that and put that in this competency of communicating and talk to you about a little bit about that. And one of the things that good leaders need to learn how to do is to synthesize a lot of information. How many of you have worked on big projects where you've written super long project plans or large white papers that are like 30, 40, 100 pages long? Anybody done that? Okay, well, it's a big term paper type of a thing. And undoubtedly you get into business and you start seeing the nuances and the little details of things. And so it's easy to write a lot about a little bit of a topic when you start pulling on the threads and there's another thing I have to talk about. Oh, there's another complication or another issue. And that's a big part of our job, is looking and understanding all the details of an issue. But when we start thinking about from a leadership and a communicating point of view, particularly when we want to communicate up the approval level, we have to start thinking about it from a perspective of synthesizing. And so what I mean by synthesizing is taking large amounts of information and distilling them to the pertinent facts and being able to make those facts relevant. And there are two really good reasons why you synthesize, in my view. First of all, you're going to pitch, and pitch by meaning you're trying to get funding at some level, or you're trying to get a project approved, you're trying to get resources. All of that is the same thing. It's pitching. or you need to explain something. We're rolling out a process. We're rolling out a technology. How do I explain that in a way that gets buy-in, people understand it, what we're really trying to do? So this is the reason why you synthesize a lot of information, so you're well educated and you're able to pitch and explain. Now there's some benefits here. Pitching to gain funding or change, and explaining to cause change or to socialize. So these are the kind of the three outputs I think of when I think about how we're going to take information and communicate them. It's generally along these three types of things. And the idea of socializing information, we've been doing it for a long time, but it's becoming very, very popular now because we have in terms of that word or that brand, because we have ways of doing it like we've never had before. But socializing information has always been really critical for causing change and also being able to get funding. So this is what I want to present today, and I brought some stuff to make it a little bit interactive. I explained up front that this is a workshop kind of idea. So just quick show of hands, how many are excited that there's a workshop or want to do some workshop type thing here? Okay, we have a few, all right, good, that's good enough. Okay, so as you think about this, so I'd like everybody to participate at some level, even if you're not going to take physical notes, but think about it mentally here. I want you to think about three things. One is you're going to see some key ideas that I'm going to present today. You can't really integrate all of them. You're going to find an idea or two that matches the situation you have. Start thinking about, how do I apply that? And then make sure you note your thoughts. Even as I was preparing for this, I was watching a couple of videos and I thought, oh yeah, I'll remember that when I come back to do it again, to take more detailed notes. And by the time I came back to do it again, like, oh, no, I couldn't quite remember exactly it didn't have the same flavor. So when you get that burst of inspiration, take a note, write it down, because it'll be relevant to what you're going to do. And then in the end of this, I'd like a couple of brave souls who would be willing to share what they've come up with as a result of this little workshop, presentation, demonstration thing. Okay? Hope that's fair. All right, so let me paint the landscape. There's some realities here that I want to help share with you. And I think there are four realities. First of all, the reality is when you're going to communicate something, and let me put this from a position of pitching. I draw a lot on VC processes, and I've been through that process myself, where I've had to pitch for money, or I've been with people that have pitched for money. And I've noticed that it's really the same type of thing, whether you're pitching for money for $5 million on a startup, or $500,000 for a startup, or $80,000 for a startup. Kind of the pitches all have these same flavors to them, and they have the same mechanics or the same content that you would pitch if you were here at Xactware and you had the opportunity to pitch to your vice president for a $150,000 project or a $2 million project. All of these things have the same elements to it. And so I wanted to share these with you. And the first is that when you get to the point of pitching, 1 to 2 slides or 1 sheet of paper is really all you should think about. You're like, how am I going to do that for $5 million? Or how am I going to do that for $80,000? How am I going to justify it with just, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. How am I going to do that with just 1 sheet of paper or 2 slides? That's what I want you to think about, because that's what you have to be able to do. Sometimes I teach at BYU and UVU, and just recently I gave some assignments out to some of my BYU students where I said, okay, here's your assignment. In 100 words or less, communicate this concept to the CEO. It was an HR class. I said, so you are the HR VP for this company, and here's the business problem. I think it was around affirmative action. I said, you have 100 words. Write an email to the CEO. And I'm the CEO, so send it to me. So this idea of being able to get down to just a very few amount of words becomes really important. And we don't force ourselves to do that enough. But when you're pitching for something that matters, you have to force yourself to do that. And I'll share with you why a little bit. Now I have an example. I say not 98, because I was with this startup. and we did this. We built some brilliant software. I mean, I really think it was brilliant. It had the opportunity to change supply chain processes around the world. It was just this brilliant algorithm that this guy had created. We then turned it into software, created a kind of a business model around it, and we had this kickoff launch at a conference, and it was a room like this, except it was like double. Imagine double you here. I mean, it was so crowded, people were just standing around. And he had an hour, the VP had an hour to present his software and see if we couldn't get some early buyers. People were obviously very excited about the software because it was the hottest breakout there was. I was aghast when I started watching what he was doing. We coached him, but he didn't listen to our coaching. He had 98 slides. I'm not kidding. He went through 98 slides. And at the end of the meeting, so he used all of the hour to get his 98 slides out because he was really interested in making sure that everybody understood the genius behind the software, you know, how it worked, why it was important, all of the details behind the white paper. And he did a great job if that's what you were interested in, but people quickly started losing interest. Within 5 minutes, they started losing interest and started doing other things. We missed the opportunity to get several key launch customers right there in that meeting. It was super costly. So 1 to 2 slides, not 98, and you can do it. The second thing is 15 minutes is really all you ought to be thinking about. Actually, you should be thinking about 5. When I schedule a meeting, this is really typical. When I used to schedule meetings with top officers, senior executives in companies, I would ask for an hour. Sometimes a big topic, I'd ask for 2 hours. But now what I do, and I've morphed into this, I ask for 30 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes. And I always plan to use half. So whatever I ask for, I cut it in half, and that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to give them back half that time. That requires me to be pretty direct right up front and to get my information out quickly. So I have the word Kaiser up here because, again, I've had a history of startups. So I had another startup, and this was also good software, and I had the opportunity to pitch to the CIO of Kaiser Permanente. And we were in his big office overlooking Oakland, and I had an hour meeting with him, and I was sitting there, and you know, you're supposed to do the get to know you stuff, right? The glad handing and the niceties. And suddenly 45 minutes has gone, and we're still in the get to know you phase. And he's talking, and I'm sort of listening, and I totally let him take over the meeting. And so with about 12 minutes left, I had the opportunity to try to pitch what I wanted to show him, and it was very ineffective. We never did land that deal. I mean, he was nice enough, but because I let him control the meeting, I didn't get to convey my message, which really was a disservice to him. I mean, I thought we were building rapport and a relationship, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted to hear about the software, and he was just being kind. He was more of an extrovert, so he was talking a lot. And I failed to seize the moment and take advantage of that. So when I say 15 minutes, I mean it. You have to get in, and you can't let the power of the meeting shift. You have to take control of it, regardless of rank, which is really hard for us in rank-structured organizations. Number 3, abstract. I call it detail on demand. So come prepared with just the abstract idea. The person you're pitching to is going to be somewhat familiar. You're going to have to present the abstract in a way that moves them to the next step of the action. And I'm going to show you a video about some experiences about how you can help move people to action or the next step. But, you know, if you're like me, you're always worried. Well, I was a finance major. What was a focus in finance. And so I did huge spreadsheets, and I was so interested in return on investment. And I could prove it 1,000 different ways. And what if the CEO asked me this way? I wanted to be prepared. So you come to these pitch presentations with a binder full of data, and nobody will read it, right? But you have it just in case. So it's detail on demand. So you do have to go through that work. You can't just wing it. You have to know your stuff. They'll ask you numbers. You got to know those numbers. But you don't present those numbers. You don't present that detail. You don't hand them the binder unless they want it and expect them to read through it. Now, it's about getting to know your people, because sometimes I have seen top officers who give me the information the night before, and they'll actually read it. But that's like 1 in 1,000 as far as my experience goes. And then the fourth thing is about audience. how many software developers, designers, how many designers in here? Anybody with design experience? Anybody? Oh, okay, a little bit. Well, designers think from perspective of the user. Good designers do. And they look at the user from like all types of perspectives. What do they do in the morning? What are their issues? What are their personal issues? What's keeping them up at night? How many emails do they get in a day? I mean, they just think about all of this stuff as they consider design. Well, that's how we should analyze people we're pitching to. We really need to get to know them. Not more than just, oh, that's the vice president, or more than that's the person with the money, or more than that's my team I've got to convey this message to. I have to get to know them in terms of, so that I can communicate to them at a level that my stuff is going to be meaningful to them. Because I know it's meaningful, it's important to them, but how do I convey that? So a big part of that is getting to know the audience. Now, another kind of sad story is, I'll have to tell you, how many vice presidents we have in the room? I know we have one, at least, right? Two, okay, good, all right. So you're probably not like this. But my experience is, as I'm presenting to senior executives like CEOs are really like this, they're the kings of rat hole, or the queens of rat hole. Because what happens is you come in and you have 30 minutes or you have an hour to present to these top officers, and you show your first slide, and suddenly they ask questions. And your first slide was just some background information. And you're like, no, this is not what we want to talk about. I'm just setting the table, right? And but suddenly they're asking questions about your background information, and at first you're thinking, oh, they're engaged, and that's really cool. But then you're realizing, oh no, now I'm answering questions about stuff that are totally tangential to the key topic. Well, this happens. So senior leaders, in my view, are kings and queens of rat holing. And I think they do it not on purpose, not trying to sidetrack you, but they do it because I think they're trying to help you. So I had this experience that made me believe this. I had the opportunity to pitch a VoIP, voice over IP technology, this is like, I don't know, a dozen years ago, to the CEO, and we did it over a Skype type of a situation because everybody was remote, and he had several of his officers on. And I had a slide deck, 10 or so slides, and this happened to me. And I was like so frustrated before we could even get into the main topic. The meeting was over and we had rat-holed down several types of different topics. But the CEO was also frustrated. And he recognized, he said, look, let's schedule a meeting and go after this again. So I was pretty lucky. As I was analyzing what happened in that meeting, I realized that everybody there was trying to help me out. I was giving them sort of red herring information. I was giving them smoke screen stuff that wasn't important to either one of us. But yet, because they were seeing it, they were trying to help me out by asking questions. So I've come to the conclusion that senior leaders can rat hole, but they don't do it because they're bad. They do it because they're actually trying to help you. So you got to help them help you by only giving them the information that's going to make a difference. So when we got a chance to go to that second round, I did it differently. Instead of 10 slides, I did one slide. And it was awesome because the one slide focused exactly on the VoIP implementation, the benefits, the cost. I nailed it all in one. It was a graphic, best of all. And so using that process is very powerful. We got to, instead of an hour, we were on it for 30 minutes, and we got to decision, we got to funding, and we moved forward. So that's what can happen when you set the table in the correct way. And I just thought I would share with you why it backfires so often when you're presenting to senior leaders. So think about it from a sales perspective. You are always selling, and you're selling against other choices. Because when you're presenting an idea, if you're pitching for money, there's a limited supply of money. If you're pitching for projects, there's still a limited supply of money. Even if you're pitching to an internal team, there's limited capacity, limited resources. When you're pitching an idea to your internal team, we're going to do this, they're thinking, what am I giving up? How am I going to squeeze this in? This person doesn't even know what I do during the day. So it's like, I didn't know how I'm going to get all this in. So you have to think about that there are choices and trade-offs that are constantly happening. And so decision makers are people. And here's another mistake we make when we go to pitch to people that have power and control. We get really nervous about it. Oh no, that's the CEO. But really, these are great people, and they are people. And they're very interested in what you have to say. That's why they're going to let you talk to them. So it's easy to get nervous. You have to psych yourself out and not let yourself get nervous. That's my big point here is decision makers are people. Don't let them freak you out, okay? You actually know more about this topic than they ever will. And they're leaning on you to help. You are their partner in this case. So you got to stand up and be that. You got to get yourself to that level. There's something about the way we talk with other people. We can instantly subordinate ourselves if we're not careful. And that's sort of what I want to talk. I want you not to do. I want you to not subordinate yourself. I want you to be on equal plane when you're pitching ideas and when you're communicating things that need to have action, because then people will see you on an equal plane. They will see you as a peer, and then you will have pierced the veil, so to speak, and you will be able to create an energy that couldn't have happened any other way. And then you need to think about objectives and needs. So this is a real problem with sales. How many salespeople do we have in the room? Any? It's so easy to sell features. Because it's not easy to sell it. It's so easy to try to sell features because you're trying to talk about the features of your product because they're so cool. But features don't really get it done. Features that solve specific objectives and needs actually create benefits that get it done. So when you're pitching, what are the benefits that we're actually talking about? What benefits does this idea portray? And distill your content to benefits and eliminate the sidebar features. As cool as you think they are, got to eliminate them. So I think about it from a Casio and a Rolex point of view. You're probably thinking, wow, I didn't know I was coming to a sales meeting. It's all sales. We're always selling. But if you're selling a Casio watch with like a bazillion features and functions, that's a different audience. But if you're selling to a Rolex CEO, the Casio watch, you got a translation problem. What does that Rolex CEO really care about? Does it look good and is the time right? That's it, right? Those beautiful things are the benefit for that person. So you got to think about your topic in that perspective. Silence. Silence is really, really powerful. Back to the design concept. Good designers design white space into their web pages and into their marketing materials. Good negotiation, good presentation will use a kind of a white space technique. I call it silence. You'll get to that magic point where you've said everything you want to say, or you've said something really important, and now it's the decision maker's turn. But she's not saying anything, and so it's really quiet and it's very uncomfortable. You're like, oh no. So you fill the silence, right? And so you start adding a little bit more to it. Well, let me tell you about this one more thing. Or here's something else we're going to do. Oh, the people are going to love it. And you keep filling the silence. And what you're doing is you're delaying the decision. Because that silence does two things. One, it actually is pressure that you are applying to the decision maker. Let it work for you. It will work for you. It will force a decision. It will force some kind of information to come back from them that you can use. Because if it's an objection, you're like, yeah, I need to know that. Or if the price is wrong, yeah, I need to know that. Or, this isn't really my priority. I need to know that. So let that silence work. At the same time, that silence, leaders they have to think too. They need time to process. So let the silence work. And then the other thing is flinching. This is you'll see this when you buy cars a lot. We flinch. Good salespeople will flinch when they state a price and then you state, no, I'm interested in that price. Like, whoa, are you kidding me? So that's a flinch. Or I thought you could do better than that. Or I thought we could afford more than that. So let me give you an example of how to flinch in a real business meeting internally where we're not trying to sell anything. So I was working with a top officer, and this top officer had asked me to present to him 2 software options. So I did that, and in the process of presenting the 2 software options, I also presented the dollar amount. But I didn't know exactly how much money that officer was really willing to give up for this project. So I kind of guessed at it a little bit, but I also realized how much did we really need to do it in this big full-scale way. So I pitched the full amount. And he flinched when we got to the number. He was like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And so how do I handle that? I flinched back. I'm like, whoa, well, I thought you wanted the whole thing. Or I thought you wanted to be successful. So I took the power back. And I mean, you can do it without being rude. But it's important to do that because you pull back and you make this, because if you don't, you're like, oh, I'm sorry. I've offended you by assuming that you were ready to spend too much. I feel really bad now. If you do that, they will get the wrong message. But if you pull back and you flinch and you pull the power back by, well, I assumed or I expected or I built this for this scenario, and then you offer them an out. But we can tailor that down. Okay, now I know better that that's actually not in the budget, so let's look a little bit for some scaled down versions, or let's lengthen the project out. And so here's the key question. So how much are we, how big's the box? A lot of ways you can ask that. I'm usually just get direct. Well, how much money are we going to spend? But if you don't want to say that, you go, how big's the box? How long are, you can just find another clever way of doing it. But that was really powerful because then the person came back to me and said a quarter of what I had framed up. And I'm like, I got it. Okay, perfect. I know exactly what to come back to. So in that meeting, we set the other meeting. Don't leave the meeting without the other meeting. Come back, present for that amount, and we're good. So flinching. So these are classic sales techniques, and they will work all the time, inside and out. Now, a couple of things here. Think like a marketer. When you present, where do the eyes go? So now I'm talking about how you present something. And again, I'll give some examples. Eyes go to a certain place. Think about where your eyes go when you look at a web page or when you look at a document or something. Or if you're not even sure, you guys have great designers at Xactware. And if you're not with Xactware, you're probably with a company. You have access to designers. Ask them. They know exactly where the eyes go when you first look at a page. So that's where you want your key message. And what is the message? Make sure your message is really clear and crisp. Make sure that there's action associated with what you're trying to do. FAQs, again, detail on demand. So have your stuff ready sort of in this FAQ style, sidebar binder. But don't make it part of the main content. Eye candy, we're too used to that. We are always throwing up images and stuff that just because it's an image. The image needs to make sense. The eye candy needs to be connected to what you're talking about because then it will have power. It will make a connection for action. Low tech. Can we do anything low tech? Could I have presented this low tech? Yeah, I probably would have done better. But low tech is so powerful. Let me tell you a story. We were selling software. And so I used this actually. That last story I told you about where I flinched? I used this technique in that last story. It was an internal pitching a project internally. So what we did is my selling partner and I, we were presenting to this high-tech company, this new software. And instead of doing a PowerPoint, because that's what everybody did, and there were a lot of problems with technology, we're not going to do technology. We printed out one slide that had a cool graphic that showed the business proposition, and then it had a backside to it. And we printed out, and we had about 8 people in the meeting around a table, so we printed out about, not 8 copies, we printed out about 3. And so we strategically placed them in a way that everybody had to share. So we get these leaders, and they're in there sharing, they're looking, and they're very interested in this piece of paper on the table because it told a story that we wanted to tell. And so we talked them through this story. So it was low tech. We didn't turn the computer on, and we sold the deal because we were able to communicate. We were able to just have a relationship with them. So I used that same experience when I was pitching an internal. I've done this several times, pitching an internal project. So powerful not to turn on the computer. Recently, I did this at BYU. I gave everybody a scenario, and I said, okay, you can't use technology, and you have 4 minutes to tell me to solve this one problem. And the students, and I put them in little teams, and the students would come in, and several of them were still using their iPhone. I'm like, no, you can't use that. So I'd take points off. But a couple of them got it, and they came in with like a handout or a banner that they had printed, right? Some of them tried to write on the whiteboard. Bad idea, unless you've got good handwriting and you can do it fast. So it didn't work. Now here's what I've seen work really well. I've seen a flannel board story work really well. No kidding. I've done a flannel board story in business probably half a dozen times. It works great. You don't have to make it a little kiddie style stuff, although you can if you know your audience, and it can be fun. But the idea of building, that's what PowerPoint does, is it builds concepts, right? Well, imagine taking a concept and just building it across the wall. I've done it from one end of the wall to the other. Imagine just doing that. And you can tell a tremendous story that way. But you got to have big enough stuff that makes sense, okay? So that's a way to do it. Resume templates work. Resume templates. I'm going to show you an example. You go to Word, and you can pull up a resume template, and you can get a great idea for how to do a one-page presentation on somebody. I used that. Articles with insert concepts. So think about how articles are written. Fast Company or other good blogs. They write the articles, but they always have little inserts that you can go to click more. Remember, it's information on demand, but we focus what we want them to know. And then big picture flow diagrams. Believe it or not, flow charts, they work. If you can do a good flow chart at the right level, they really work. It's very important to be able to do flow charts. We've lost that skill, I think, a little bit. And then flannel boards. I told you about flannel boards. I love flannel board. I love flannel board opportunities. If we can do a flannel board, I do it. But regardless of the audience, so make sure you're presenting for understanding, and make sure that you do this one thing. What is the next logical step that you want them to take? It may not be sign the check. There's a step that you're asking decision makers to do. Or if you're presenting to your team, there's a step you want them to take. What is it? Don't try to do too many steps. Do the next step. What's the next step? So I have this process. It's just my own thing. I do it. I do it instinctively, probably because I have a lot of Machiavelli traits about me. I just call it organic change. And instead of making big announcements about how we're going to do things, I just do them. Just do the next little thing, right? And then the next little thing, and then the next little thing. And suddenly, we're down the road. And I had this happen where somebody, a peer of mine, came to me and goes, wow, we got all the way down that road. How'd you do that? And I was thinking, oh, yeah, we did. How did I do that? And I realized, I just do this instinctively. We just make little change. And that's so beautiful because we avoid the complex political environment. Remember I told you one of the things Leaders247 does is solve big, complex problems? Most of the time, the reason they're big and complex is because they tried to roll out something too big and too complex. Trying to get 47 people to agree on one thing, this would take us a while. So we don't have to do that way. We agree on strategy. That's why we all work here. So let's just move it along the strategy road, little by little. So it's a very powerful concept. So let's talk about a few ideas. By the way, does anybody know what the 10-20-30 rule is? For a prize. I'll give you something if you know the 10-20-30 rule. Okay. You'll know it after this meeting, hopefully. All right. So here's an idea. This is an example I did not too long ago. I kind of strip all the names out to protect the innocent and the guilty. But I just, this was not a financial decision. This was a concept decision, okay? We had to present two different pieces of software. So on one piece of paper, very clean, a lot of white space, focus around, okay, what's the situation? And I did that print technique. I just used this. What's the situation? And situation is we're trying to bring some software in that solves our strategy stack problem. What are our choices? What are the choices? Really narrow it down. Don't bring in like 5 choices and then a blend of the 3, or of 3. Just 2, 3 choices at the most. And sometimes the best choice is do nothing, right? So don't forget that choice. And what are those choices? And keep it really simple around the good and the bad of them. And then what's the issue? What's making this complex? Why do we have to decide between these two, or what's the problem? And all this and we talked for an hour. This was just a way to set the discussion. So that's an example of how you can. Here's another one. And I just went out and found this last night. I just opened up Word and I did resume template. And I found this really cool layout. And there's two of them, really. I like them both. And I've actually used something similar to the one on the left. And the beauty of this layout is it's that article with insert kind of thing. And you can move these around, right? So just be creative. You can move them around. You could have, imagine, on the left here, you could have just the synopsis, maybe how much it's going to cost, maybe the strategy it's solving, just some high-level things. And then you can put some details here, right? And you can change the font around. At the high level, we've got bigger font because we're trying to focus them there, and maybe we got a little lower font here. But things that person or those decision makers might be interested in. This is a really cool technique. So you can find presentation styles everywhere. And people are so tired of the normal stuff that these, it's a kind of a slap effect. They're like, oh, let me look. Oh, what am I looking at? It forces them to look at it. Here's one I like. I've never used this one, but I think I will. It's really cool. Tons of white space. And I won't get rid of this white space. I'll leave the white space. I'll just have the topic, and then 3 steps. And then these bullets over here, I might just eliminate 1 or 2 of the bullets on each one of these because I don't want it to be too crowded. Again, what this does is it forces me to synthesize my information down to the critical nuggets, the kernel. What's the kernel of what I'm communicating? When I know that, and I can present very well. Master presenter, Steve Jobs. And I just found this little blog article the other day. I thought I'm going to share that with you. I'll share my slides so you can go to the link here. But these are 5 things he did. And one thing I loved is the story of good overcoming evil. Can you do that? Could you do that here at Xactware? Could you find a way of good overcoming evil? Possibly. Well, that'd be great because it gets people involved and they're interested. And yeah, let's do this. All right. Let's watch a few videos. This is how it's done, I think. I love this one.
We've actually adopted some of the things that we've developed inside. When we work with young entrepreneurs in Kick Labs, part of what we do, we get them pretty early, so they have to learn how to not only pitch for money, but pitch for customers. And it's amazing how bad they are. So we actually make these guys condense their pitch into a 1-minute pitch. Can you still do yours? Is it okay if he does his pitch?
Want to do your 1-minute pitch?
That was impromptu.
Okay,
this
ready
is
to
at
go.
standby.
Who has a timer? Okay.
Okay.
Here, I'll hold your water for you.
All right.
Okay.
Timer. Tulio.
By show of hands, how many of you have witnessed either a parent, a child, a friend, or maybe your spouse struggle with obesity? You don't have to raise your hand for this one, but think about it. Did you ever feel helpless in their struggle? If you have, you're not alone. Many people who have lived in a low-income community, like I have, where the obesity rate is above 50%, have experienced the same feeling of helplessness. That's why today, I'm doing something about it. Good evening. My name is Horatio Harts, and I'm the founder of Healthy Hearts Institute, the co-op that will bring health and fitness back into our neighborhoods. HHI will turn empty lots into gardens and transform neighborhood food deserts into green nutritional oases. We will turn abandoned buildings into LEED-certified fitness centers and provide our members safe places to exercise. Our goal is to get us back to the good old days when the community was ripe with nutritional foods, kids were outside running and playing, and the obesity rate was below 17%. So join the Healthy Hearts Institute and let us empower the beat of your heart. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good, huh? What did you learn from this one? What did you learn? What did you learn from that presentation style?
I liked how he started. He pulled everybody in and said, "Can you relate with me?" So everybody started in the same place with him, and then he led us down a path to the positives at the end with, "Yeah, there's a great example. Let's join you."
Good versus evil. We're on the same team. Made it very simple. He resonated with a real issue, right? What else? That's awesome. What else did you learn from this?
It was pretty evenly broken up into thirds, and he was like, pulled everybody in first third. Second third was like, here's my idea, and the third he was like, and here's how I'm going to do it. But it was very quick, but evenly paced across the 60 seconds.
Yeah. Excellent. What else did you learn? Those are two excellent learnings. There's at least one more out there. Yeah.
It was pretty simplistic.
Yes.
So you would understand exactly what he was trying to do.
Exactly. See, this is not dumbing it down, because the people he's pitching to have millions and they're very smart, but they don't have a lot of time. And you got to resonate with them quickly. That's the same thing as our leaders here. I was listening to Kevin earlier, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just so busy," and I know he is. I know him personally, and I know him professionally. I know he's busy, busy, busy. So if you want to do something cool for Kevin, give him a 1-minute pitch and give him back 29 other minutes of the meeting, right? He'll use it. He'll go find something else to do, right? So I like this. And the takeaway I got, the one that jumped out at me and like, I have to continue to get better at this, is I convey a complex message in a super short amount of time. It is totally possible. I mean, before seeing this, how many thought that you could take a complex topic and present in 1 minute? Not me, I didn't. I would have always gone to 3 to 5 minutes, or 4 minutes was sort of my magic number. But 1 minute, he did it, and he wasn't rushing, he did it very well. So all those points are really important. Let's watch another video. Guy Kawasaki is a favorite of mine. I watched him, I met him in Portland, Oregon, and I went to one of his breakfast meetings. The guy is just hilarious, and he's the real deal. He's a great entrepreneur. So listen to what Guy says, and this was at Stanford also, about pitching, and you're going to get to know the 10, 20, 30
The next
rule.
thing is the art of pitching. Pitching is usually used to raise money, but pitching more generically is about the process of seeking agreement. You can seek agreement for money, you can seek agreement to recruit, you can seek agreement for partnership, you can seek agreement for sales. Pitching. You know the Latin saying of "I think, therefore I am." For an entrepreneur, it is "I pitch, therefore I am." An entrepreneur is always pitching. There is what I call the 10, 20, 30 rule. The 10 part of the 10, 20, 30 rule is that the optimal number of slides for a PowerPoint pitch is 10. Maybe it's 15, but it's not the 50 that you think it is. If you can cover these 10 subjects very well, the next step will be due diligence. Many people think that if you put 50 slides together, the audience will be overcome with shock and awe, and all they can ask is, "How do I wire you the money?" I have never, ever seen that happen, all right? The purpose of a pitch is to get to the next stage of due diligence. The purpose of a pitch is not to try to close the venture capital firm, the partner, the customer in that meeting. The second point is the 20. I think you should be able to use these 10 slides in 20 minutes. You may have a 60-minute meeting, but I guarantee you it'll start late. The partners from the firm will come in late. You're using a Windows laptop. You can't make it work with the projector. Something will go wrong. Something will go wrong. And the third point is 30-point font. The smallest font you should use on a slide is 30 points. This single recommendation will prevent you from getting in trouble with most slides. Lots of people like to use 8, 10, or 12-point font. They like to write out the entire paragraph, and then they read the paragraph. People can read faster than you can talk. So if you put all of the text that you want to say up on the slide, they will read it if they can see it, and they will be done before you've explained it. The ideal size font is 30. If you think this is too dogmatic, let me give you an algorithm. The algorithm is find out who the oldest person will be in the meeting, take that age and divide by 2. Okay? So unless you're presenting to 16-year-olds, do not use the 8-point font.
Okay. What did we learn from Guy? You have to learn something because you have to pay for your lunch. And to pay for your lunch is your learning. So what did you learn from Guy? Yeah.
Keep it short. Keep it readable.
Yeah.
Keep it to the point.
Can anybody explain the 10-20-30 rule?
10, you only have 10 slides. You only want your presentation to take 20 minutes, and you don't want to do less than 30 points long.
There you go. Okay, so a prize is my book. Right, every presenter has a book, right? And they have to give a book away. And this book happens to be called Selling to Business. I wrote it about, 100 years ago. But and I'm not here trying to sell it. You don't have to go out and buy my book. But in the book has a lot of the things I've talked about here, and share some more stories, but I use Guy's ideas. So 10-20-30 is so important. Use that in here when you're presenting to people. They will appreciate it. What else did we learn from Guy? Anything else?
Less is more.
Less is more, absolutely. Yeah. Let people think into let them think about what they're doing. Good. Yeah.
So he's biased against Windows products?
He is. He's a total Apple guy, yeah. And he makes that clear. It's pretty funny. Yeah.
He talked about making sure that you recognize that you don't, even when it's your meeting, you don't control the meeting. So part of his reasoning on 20 minutes was even if it's not a meeting, you probably only better be ready to only take 20 minutes because you may not control it.
Yep, exactly.
And that's like that in a lot of ways, whether it's the projector that won't mate with your computer or the screen that won't go down or the sound that doesn't work, you've got to be ready for that stuff. And less really gets to be more in those situations.
Exactly. Great point. You had one?
Don't fill your slide with text.
Yeah, they can, yeah.
Also learned that the actual pitch isn't the end game, it's just to move on to the next step rather than...
This is such a critical point, is we forget this, and we forget what the steps are. This is why the sales process is a good analogy, or the pitching process is a good metaphor for how we present inside an organization. Because it'll force us to not forget a step, right? How many of you have ever been to a meeting where you presented? It was a very important meeting, something really important on the line for you and for the people coming, and yet, it started late because the key decision makers were late. Anybody been to that this morning? Yeah, okay. Or worse, it started late, not all the key decision makers were there, you're 10 minutes into what you're talking about, and then another key decision maker shows up. Anybody do that? Yeah, we do it all the time, right? You get so frustrated with that. It's another reason for keeping your slides simple and keeping yourself nimble. That happened to me when I was pitching for about $500,000, and it was the first time I personally pitched to some venture capitalists, and we started late. I was the first one on the docket. At first I thought it was really cool that I was going to be the first on the docket. Then I realized that was bad. It would be better to be last on the docket in that case. So I was the first on the docket. Everybody was late. They were still shuffling around while I was on the clock to talk. And then halfway through, somebody comes in, and I'm like, do I catch that person up or what? I just decided to keep going, but it just wasn't one of my best presentations. So it was awkward. Anyway, these are good things to learn. Let's do another one. I think we have time for one more. This is a guy from Instagram. I'm going to skip this. What he said was they never did a pitch deck. I'll just shorten it. The Instagram founder, he said, we always did prototypes. We didn't even think about a pitch deck. We just had a prototype. Could you go into your meeting where you're asking for something with a prototype of some sort, a manual prototype or a working prototype? They're very, very powerful. You don't need a bunch of slides if you have something you can show that's done well. Okay? It's not getting in and hacking your way through the software. It's having a very organized prototype of that, whatever it is you're doing. But this last one, she kind of drives home a lot of these points that we've been talking about. So I want to maybe have this be the last.
They gave me a great piece of advice when I first became a venture capitalist, and they said that this is what they like to see in an entrepreneur, and I would echo this to you. Every step of the way in your communication with a VC, your only goal is to get to the next step. So you meet a VC and they say, I'm working on this anti-gravity machine. Would you like to hear more about it? And the VC says, sure. And then the next day, the UPS truck shows up with the carpet bomb of data, right? And the business plan is 500 pages, and you've had your high school principal call already and talk about your GPA, and it's like way overkill, right? The next step is just to get a meeting, or so just think about that is very much, what do I want to accomplish each day. The day you come in to present, don't plan on having an hour of someone's time, because you'll have an hour meeting. In the hour meeting, they'll be 15 minutes late and somebody's cell phone will ring. More often than not, it's the entrepreneur. I can almost guarantee that in every pitch, the entrepreneur will forget to turn off his phone and it'll ring, and then you'll have this sort of awkward thing. The demo won't work. That'll soak up another 10 minutes. So, by the time you actually are dealing with the pitch, it's very, very short. Get to your value proposition in like the first 5 minutes. I mean, really, what is the entrepreneur what is the VC looking for? We're looking, can you actually articulate what you're trying to accomplish? And generally, if you have some credibility of some past experience that's relevant, hi, I actually worked on the design for X, and now I'm doing Y, which is the follow-on to X. Remember X, it's $1 billion market. I mean, that's really nice, right? So establish some credibility. And get to why someone would want to buy this thing, right? And what stage you're at. And keep it short, 20 minutes. If you can't articulate, we joke about the elevator pitch, it's maybe a bad, I was going to say the era of the really tall building is over. I guess that's not a very good thing to say. But as it relates to elevator pitch, and I used to say to somebody, we need a really tall building for this elevator pitch because I got to ride this elevator a long time. If that's the case, if you can't articulate the value proposition. Now, not everything's simple, right? I mean, part of the problem is if you're working on load balancing infrastructure, it's hard to get in the elevator pitch. But let's assume that you're pitching to someone who already has some concept, right? If you're trying to educate someone who, oh yeah, I used to invest in retail, but now I'm thinking this server stuff looks really interesting. You're going to spend forever. So don't, pre-qualify the person you're pitching to. And then the last thing I would tell you is control the meeting. And I know that sounds really hard, but if you come in and you right up front say, I'm going to take 20 minutes, and if you bear with me, here are my slides. I got 10 slides. I think I can articulate it. Then we can spend whatever time you have left talking. Try to control the meeting. You have the podium. You have the clicker box. You're standing in front, and to the best extent you can, and unfortunately, venture capital.
Okay, so she rehashed a lot of the things that we've already been talking about. Control the meeting, distill it to a short number of things, short amount of things you're going to talk about. Prepare for, take care of your cell phone and all of that stuff. Anything else that just jumped out at you from her presentation? I liked her description of the carpet data bomb. That's what we do. We've done tons of homework, and we just are so proud of it. We want everyone to see it. The data bomb is for our own use, so we don't launch it on someone else. Okay, so think about the workshop now. We have a few minutes left, and here's what I would leave you with, is when you're thinking about your presentation, ask yourself a bunch of these questions and make sure you have these things. So I've done my own synthesis of those presentations, and try them out. So not everything works. Not everything that works for me will work for you. So you have to find your own style. But it's totally cool. Try it out, pitch it, see how it works, make a note, adjust, and just recognize that when you're in a leadership role, you have a responsibility to be a great communicator. It's a core competency for leaders. And I think I'll just leave with that, and we can have questions. Or if anybody has, through this process, done something they want to share, say, hey, I got a great 1-minute pitch, we would love to hear it. Any questions? Okay, well, I guess that's it then. I would, the next step of this is, if somebody wanted to seriously work on a workshop, I could be of use, or I could help, or I can coach, or whatever. But that would be the next step. Okay, well, thank you for coming.
Well, we thank you, Gordon, for coming. Very good round of applause. have these leadership meetups for the leadership at Xactware every other month, starting in February, and Gordon will be back then. So please come and see again. So thank you, Gordon. We appreciate it.